Good afternoon, my name is Camden and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going through my fall TBR pile. I have a lot of weird, speculative, and spooky books to talk to you guys about today, so let's just hop into the books because I am quickly losing daylight. I did try to select a lot of books that I physically own so that I could bust through some of my physical TBR. However, the very first book on this list is not one that I own, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Margaret Rogerson is a pretty well-established YA fantasy author. She has several very recognizable books, and strangely enough, I've never picked any of them up, so this will be my first book from her. I believe it is her debut novel, but this book is following a main character named Isabel, who is an artist that paints the portraits of fae. All of her patrons are fae, so she is pretty well accustomed to dealing with them and their laws and their habits and their various quirks. However, at the beginning of this book, she ends up getting her very first royal client, who is the Autumn Prince, and she makes a grave mistake when she ends up painting human sorrow into the portrait, which for one reason or another that is not clear to me, having not read the book, is a risk for him to lose the throne. So together they have to kind of combat this and figure out how to fix it. I believe there's a forbidden romance between the two of them, but I'm not too sure. Either way, I've had this book on my radar for quite a while, and given that he is the Autumn Prince, I felt like it would be fitting to read during the fall. The next book that I have on my list is from one of my favorite authors of all time, and that is Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I have technically only read 2 books from this author, but that rocketed her up to the top of my list when it comes to authors, so I'm excited to continue into reading some of her backlog. This book in particular is a crime noir mystery novel. We are following 2 characters who are in their kind of free time investigating the disappearance of an art student. One of the characters is her next door neighbor, and the other character is a man who seems to have kind of a checkered past, but I'm not really sure what his association to our missing girl is, whether he's a love interest of hers or family member of hers. I am not too sure his connection with this whole plot, but basically they are both independently of each other trying to figure out what happened to, I believe her name is Lenora, and just trying to piece together the circumstances of her disappearance. One of the reviews on the back says that this is set in the gritty underworld noir of 1970s Mexico City. So, interested? The next book that I have on my list is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. I am so drawn to the cover of this book. I love this kind of body horror on a beautiful woman dichotomy. This book is following 3 sisters, Iris, Gray, and Vivi, and 10 years ago something very strange happened to the 3 of them that they cannot remember. They disappeared for about a month and then strangely reappeared without any explanation of what had happened to them in the interim. Since their disappearances though, weird occurrences have continued to plague the sisters. Over time, their appearances have dramatically changed, and people describe their personalities as almost magnetic or intoxicating. It almost feels like they are luring in victims. At the beginning of this book, Iris's 2 sisters end up disappearing again, and she is trying to not only piece together their current disappearance, but also what happened to them 10 years ago. This book sounds really intriguing. I've heard mixed reviews over the years, but it has never dampened my excitement to read this one, so interested to pick this one up and see what I think. Next book on my list is A Far Wilder Magic by Alison Saft. I've been excited for this book ever since it was announced that it was coming out. This one is following 2 main characters who are kind of unlikely allies who are entering into this hunt for the mythical Hala creature. I believe this book is based on Slavic mythology, but I could be incorrect. Either way, I'm super excited to read this one. It has a very kind of gothic setting, and obviously a love story will ensue, so interested to check this one out. Definitely feels like an autumnal vibe to me. The next book that I'm looking to pick up this fall is one that I've had on my TBR for many years, and that is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This book hit its like peak of popularity back in 2019 or 2020, just as the pandemic was rolling in, and this book happens to be about kind of an epidemic, I guess. We're following a group of girls at an all-girls school that's set on an island, and they are under a quarantine because of this strange illness that's been running rampant throughout the school. It's called the Tox, and it kind of results in a lot of weird body horror almost symptoms, as you can kind of see on this cover. At the time of its release, I think it was a little too relevant for me to want to read. Now we're a few years out from the pandemic, and I think I can handle the contents of this book without having a panic attack. So I'm excited to read this one and see where I fall. I think a lot of people like it and a lot of people hate it, so interested to see my own thoughts. The next book on my list is Delicious Monsters by Lizelle Sambury. This is the author of the Blood Like Magic duology. So when I saw that she was coming out with like a haunted house horror, I was really interested to read it. This book is following two separate characters. One is named Daisy, and her perspective is set 10 years in the past when something very tragic happened in a haunted house. And one named Brittany, who is basically doing like an almost BuzzFeed Unsolved kind of a YouTube episode on that event. Basically, through both of their perspectives, we are unpacking and putting the pieces together on what happened in this house. I've already started this book and I am partway through it, so interested to continue on and see what I think. I'm already enjoying the vibes of it, so I will let you know in probably my September reading journal wrap up how that one went. I kind of ruined my own segue because I forgot to mention that Delicious Monsters is one of my 5-star predictions. But anyway, here's my other 5-star prediction. It is She Is a Haunting by Trang Tan Tran. This is another kind of haunted house story. It is basically in the same vein as Mexican Gothic. We are following a Vietnamese American teenager named Jade who is visiting her father in Vietnam as he is kind of renovating an old French colonial house in order to kind of rent out as like an Airbnb or a hotel or something along those lines. Jade is not happy to be there. She's really only there because her father has promised to pay her college tuition if she stays with him for a month. However, on her very first night there, weird things start happening in this house. There's a lot of dead bugs. She's having sleep paralysis issues, and she even sees a ghost of a Vietnamese woman who is telling her not to eat any of the food in the house. I'm super excited to read this one. I really love a creepy house story, especially if the house is like a character in its own right and it has like a mind of its own, which is what seems to be the case in this story. The next book that I have is like a single author anthology, and that is The Ghost Sequences. This book is a collection of short stories by A.C. Wise, and all of the stories seem to kind of focus around ghosts or like spooky elements, so kind of the perfect read for fall. And I'm excited to kind of read like a little scary story every night before bed this autumn. I really love short stories, so I'm excited to finish this one. I think I'm gonna really vibe with it. Next, I have a dark academia style fantasy and an absolute book talk favorite, and that is none other than The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. This book is following like a secret society for magicians who are kind of like the caretakers of lost civilizations and antiquities. They are the hosts of a competition in which 6 magicians participate in order to be admitted into this very secret, very exclusive society. So we are following the latest round of this competition to see which of our 6 characters is going to win and be allowed into the Alexandrian society. I believe this also has something to do with the Lost Library of Alexandria, which was definitely my favorite wonder of the world as a child, so I'm excited to read this one and see what all the hype is about. The next book that I have is one that I really do not know a lot about, but the cover intrigued me, and that is Horrid by Katrina Leno. This book is following a main character named Jane, and after her father's death, she and her mother pack up their entire life to move from California to Maine. Maine seems to be the go-to setting for like every creepy book, and I blame Stephen King. However, once they move to Maine, some weird things start happening. It does seem like our main character is pretty weird in her own right, however, because based on the very first page of this book, we find out that she eats books. I don't know if there's like a magical element to that, but I'm interested to find out. The next book on my list is another dark academia style novel, and that is A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. This book has a pretty lengthy synopsis, so I'm just gonna try and quickly summarize. Basically, this book is set at an all-girls boarding school, and we are following two main characters. The first one is named Felicity, and she's returning to the school after a year off where she was trying to recover from the very tragic and sudden death of her girlfriend. And the other character is named Ellis, and she's coming to the school for the very first time as an incoming senior. They're immediately drawn to each other, and Ellis asks for Felicity's help in researching a cold case that happened at the school, as she wants to write her next novel about it. It sounds like the school also has kind of a deep, dark, occult history to it. That sounds pretty fascinating. So just as you might expect, I'm really excited to read this one. And the final book on this list is another dark academia book and another 5-star prediction, and that is this honker, Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have heard so many people talk about this book, and yet no one ever seems to want to divulge what the plot is about. So I have pretty limited knowledge about what this book is about, but I do know that it has to deal a lot with dark academia, a kind of like Oxford style college, and languages. There's a lot to do with languages, as you might infer from the title. Either way, I'm really excited to read this one. I've heard so many people say so many wonderful things about it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm so sorry that the light is so terrible. I really need to get used to filming now that it gets dark early here in New Hampshire, but I really appreciate all of your support. If you could take a minute to like this video, comment, share, subscribe, I would really appreciate it, and I'll see you all in a new video next Friday. Goodbye!